Welcome to the Bellevue City Council regular meeting for Monday, July 20th, 2020. City Clerk, are you ready for the roll call?
Yes. Mayor Robinson?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse?
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale?
Here.
Councilmember Lee?
Here.
Councilmember Robertson?
Here.
Councilmember Stokes?
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn?
Here.
Great, thank you.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, the first thing we have is a proclamation celebrating 30 years of Americans with Disability Act. And I'm so proud of the progress that our city has made just in the 6 years that I've been on the council, most notably the Maidenbower Bay Park, which is just a wonderful universal design where everybody can enter the same way, no matter if you're on a walker or in a wheelchair or pushing a buggy. It's a great experience for everybody of all abilities. So tonight, accepting the proclamation will be Blaine Amson, and he's our ADA Title VI Civil Rights Program Administrator. We're going to have Jared read the proclamation.
Happy to do so, Mayor. Whereas the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law on July 26, 1990 to ensure the civil rights of people with disabilities and establish a clear and comprehensive national mandate for the elimination of discrimination against individuals with disabilities. And whereas the City of Bellevue embraces the diversity, culture, and contributions of many residents with disabilities in our schools, government, workforce, and community, consistently and diligently working to make city programs, services, and facilities accessible to people with disabilities. And whereas the Diversity Advantage Plan was adopted in 2014 and names guiding principles and recommendations emphasizing the value of individuals with disabilities in our community and the city's commitment to full access and inclusion. And whereas about 17% of Bellevue School District students are identified as having a disability, and almost 1/3 of older adults living in Bellevue have one or more disabilities. And whereas 30 years after the signing of the ADA, individuals with disabilities still experience disproportionate instances of discrimination, poverty, physical abuse, and health impacts. And whereas the City of Bellevue affirms that while the ADA has significantly changed the lives of people with disabilities, we must continue to strive for equal access and opportunity for this population. And whereas numerous organizations in Bellevue work with constituents and communities to bring forth the promise of hope and freedom envisioned by the passage of the ADA. And
now, therefore, Eileen Robinson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, and on behalf of its City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of July 26th through August 1st, 2020 as Americans with Disabilities Act Week, and urge all residents of Bellevue to support equity for and recognizing the value of contributions that people with disabilities add to our city and community. Blaine, we are so lucky to have you on staff. Be happy to have you say a few words, if you will.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you to the council. Thank you, Mayor, for giving me this opportunity. I think what I wanted to highlight first is that the Kindering Center right here in Bellevue actually is sponsoring this request for a proclamation. So I did want to say just a couple of words about them. They were founded in 1962 by 5 families of children with disabilities. They are now the largest, most comprehensive early intervention program with a mission. Their mission is to embrace children of diverse abilities and their families by providing the finest education and therapies to nurture hope, courage, and the skills to soar. And so I really just wanted to give an opportunity to kind of highlight the Kindering Center because they do a lot of work in our community. I also wanted to highlight the city for a moment and the staff and their work that they've done over the last year and over the many years. We've done that in this environment of COVID. We have put together a web page, and that web page is really unique. What we have done, it's on the public-facing website, and what it's done is we have 13 departments of the city. And I think there are a lot of things that the public doesn't get the chance to know about that we do for folks with disabilities, both internally and externally. And so we have every single department represented on that web page, really highlighting what does finance and asset management do specifically for people with disabilities? What does parks do? And it really gets kind of granular, talking about the specific projects that are being done. I'd like to highlight just 2 examples of the many, many that are up there. The first is that we have incorporated examples of universal design into our outreach materials, and the graphics team works really hard to ensure that all of the flyers, both digital and in print, are universally designed. Another example comes from transportation, where all of our pedestrian signals, all of our pedestrian signals will be audible, meaning that you will hear when it's time to cross by 2022. This is a lofty goal and not one that many cities have, but it's one that the transportation department set, and we are well on the way there. There are lots of other things on the website, but that's really what I wanted to bring forward for you tonight, is that we wanted an opportunity, though virtual, to really highlight all of the work that's being done by the city and to tell the public, we hear you, we see you, we recognize your needs, and we're really working hard to meet those every day and to meet the spirit of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Okay, next we have approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Next we have written communications. City Clerk, are there any written communications to read or summarize into the record?
Yes, Mayor, this evening there are 4 written communications to read into the record.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. The first communication is from Sally Lawrence, Franya Bryant, Michael Intelkoffer, Raymond Norton, Randy Gaddy, Dana Gaddy, and Susanna Spear. Thank you, Mayor and Council members, for your valuable service to our community. We are residents of Bellevue and local environmental advocates who appreciate the many parks in the city that support our health and well-being and provide a haven for our wildlife. We are writing you today to ask that you direct the Parks Advisory Board to take a look at the east end of Coal Creek Natural Area and consider any potential property acquisitions that could expand, enhance, and protect public and wildlife use of Coal Creek Natural Area. The Coal Creek Trail's eastern terminus at Lakemont Boulevard is narrowly constricted, limiting public access and providing little habitat for wildlife. The Parks Advisory Board should look at properties adjacent to the trail for opportunities to improve this entrance. One property on Lakemont Boulevard that is adjacent to the Coal Creek Trail has a unique place in Bellevue history and also provides a wildlife corridor connecting Coal Creek Natural Area and King County's Cougar Mountain Regional Wildland Park. We are aware that the city, and in particular the Parks Department, has long been interested in this property. If purchased for parkland, it would serve the public's interest in significant ways, providing open space, providing a focus for the city's coal mining history, and maintaining a small but important 80-year-old wildlife corridor. It is a key link between Bellevue's Coal Creek Natural Area and King County's Cougar Mountain Regional Wildland Park across the street. Thank you for considering this request. And I will reset the timer. The next communication is from Jane Broom of Microsoft. We applaud the Bellevue City Council and staff for their continued prioritization of policy work that will advance middle and low-income housing opportunities around the city. Data from our ongoing collaboration with Zillow shows a staggering gap of around 34,000 middle and low-income housing units in Bellevue in late 2019. It will take sustained, bold leadership to help close this gap and meet this need for our city's workers and families. With this in mind, and as the City of Bellevue's largest employer, we support the city's advancement of its affordable housing strategy, Action C1, which will increase density on land owned by public, nonprofit housing and faith-based entities for affordable housing. We recommend that the council should prioritize this work in areas where the impacts of additional density can be mitigated. We also ask the council to consider the following. Bullet 1, enact tiers of housing density relative to the property's underlying zoning and nearby uses. Bullet 2, ensure both height and FAR are considered in rezoning as necessary to accommodate the most efficient construction types. Bullet 3, consider right-sizing parking requirements for affordable units. Bullet 4, align timing for this legislation with the city's MFTE expansion so as to allow for development partners to maximize the opportunity for additional middle income and affordable housing. The unknown impacts of COVID-19 will surely deepen Bellevue's affordable housing divide in Bellevue and across King County for years to come. We must continue to put housing affordability and supply at the top of our collective policy work in Bellevue for the foreseeable future. We look forward to continuing this work together to advance this mission. Thank you for the opportunity to provide these comments. The next written communication is from Peggy Lewis Fu. And this is on behalf of NAIOP. Dear Bellevue City Council, we applaud the city for taking steps to implement its 2017 Affordable Housing Plan, and we support its efforts to advance strategies in Action C1 related to potential density increases on land owned by public, nonprofit housing and faith-based entities for affordable housing. With the impacts of COVID-19 still unfolding, now is the time to enact legislation that will build more affordable housing while also maximizing underutilized properties in the city in a manner that avoids going parcel by parcel. Council should also prioritize this work in areas where the impacts of additional density can be mitigated. In addition, State Bill 1377 requires cities planning under the Growth Management Act to provide an increased density bonus consistent with local needs for any affordable housing development for real property owned or controlled by a religious organization. We support the city's goal of working with property owners to determine the amount of density right for a viable project. Proximity to frequent transit areas should also be considered when evaluating height and FAR. We respectfully ask the city to consider the following when advancing this legislation, which we believe will help increase a project's overall affordability. Bullet 1, enact tiers of housing density relative to the property's underlying zoning and nearby uses. Bullet 2, ensure both height and FAR are considered in rezoning as necessary to accommodate the most efficient construction types. Bullet 3, implore the city to include downtown, Bellred, and Eastgate TOD areas. Although other affordable housing incentives apply in these areas, providing multiple paths towards redevelopment is attractive for owners. Bullet 4, consider waiving parking requirements for affordable units. Bullet 5, consider land use code amendments concurrent with necessary comprehensive plan amendments to speed up implementation. Bullet 6, align timing for this legislation with the city's MFTE expansion to allow for-profit development partners to maximize the opportunity for additional middle income and affordable housing. Final bullet, clarify that for-profit developers can partner with churches to realize the density bonus. Thank you again for your consideration of our comments, and we look forward to working with you as this legislation moves forward. And resetting the timer. There is one additional comment to be read, and this is from Marty Kuistra and Mallory Van Abema on behalf of Housing Development Consortium. Dear Mayor Robinson and council members, as a nonprofit member association representing over 180 organizations working within the affordable housing sector, the Housing Development Consortium is fortunate to work alongside partners within our sector and beyond to address the affordability crisis many households in Bellevue are navigating. Faith-based organizations, housing authorities, and nonprofit housing developers providers have been ideal partners to move this work forward. Faith communities in Bellevue have demonstrated a commitment to improving the housing and shelter conditions for people living, working, and playing in Bellevue. We are grateful to see the City of Bellevue continue to make progress on its affordable housing strategy plan and encouraged by the proactive steps Council and City staff are taking to explore the possibilities for land that may be utilized to accommodate more affordable homes. The scarcity of land and price of acquisition are two parameters which act as impediments for our members who are committed to preserving and producing affordable homes. Broadly approaching land use code amendments to address underlying density will increase administrative efficiency and reduce the burden of pursuing onerous spot rezones by the owning entity. Employed locally, SHB 1377 will further incentivize organizations that are interested in pursuing on-site affordable housing by increasing the total number of allowed units for a development on faith-owned property. Our work with faith communities across the county will yield multiple sub-regional conversations that mirror much of the efforts Bellevue is making. HDC remains a committed partner to the City of Bellevue and stand ready to support this critical work as needed. Our members and staff are here to offer support as you continue to meet the needs of the people who call the vibrant City of Bellevue home. And with that, that ends written communications for this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have the report of the city manager, Mr. Miyake.
There's no report tonight, Mayor.
Okay. We have the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Is there a second? Uh-oh.
We can wait for 1 second while folks unmute.
Somebody, when you get a chance, wants to pipe in with a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is that just all three of us?
Councilmember Stokes, can you accept the prompt to unmute, please? And Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Stokes?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, Mayor, we're ready for the vote now.
Okay. All those in favor to approve the consent calendar, say aye.
Aye.
Great. All those opposed? Thank you. Okay, we have 3 public hearings tonight. The first one, Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce?
Sure, Mayor, thank you. This one is Resolution 9800 declares certain utility-owned property and equipment as surplus and directing the Director of Finance and Asset Management to dispose of such property. Tonight, the council is being asked to hold the required public hearing to surplus this particular property. After the public hearing, council will be asked to approve a resolution, Resolution 9800, which declares the property as surplus and to dispose of such property. Joining us this evening is Lucy Liu, Assistant Director of the Utilities Department, as well as Tom Wall, Fleet and Communications Manager of Finance and Asset Management, to provide you a brief staff report prior to the public hearing. So Lucy.
Thank you, Mr. Miyake. Good evening, Mayor Robinson and council members. By state law and city code, the disposal of utility-owned equipment requires council hold a public hearing and take formal action. Next slide, please. And after the public hearing, staff is seeking council approval of Resolution 9800, which declares certain utility-owned equipment to have met the extent of its usefulness for utility functions and to be surplused. Next slide, please. The list of equipment to be surplused is attached to the agenda memo, and it includes vehicles, a trailer, a generator, and electronic equipment. The assets proposed for surplus range from 4 to 20 years in age and have a total estimated salvage value of $78,511. There are two main considerations when deciding to surplus equipment. One is whether the asset is still useful in meeting our business needs, and second, whether it is still cost effective to continue to maintain the asset as it ages. The vehicles that are proposed for surplus are maintained by the Finance and Asset Management Department in collaboration with the Utilities Department. Both departments have determined these assets have met the extent of their usefulness. The criteria that is used to determine whether a vehicle should be surplused are the vehicle's age, the mileage, the frequency of repairs, the availability of replacement parts, whether it sufficiently meets business needs, and vehicle downtime. And as vehicles age, they become more costly to maintain and less cost effective to keep in service. It is then in the city's best interest to replace rather than to continue to maintain it. These items will be sold in the same manner used for other city-owned equipment. The city currently uses electronic websites for disposition, and the proceeds from the sale of these items are returned to the utility that owns the property. And this concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, do we have any public testimony to hear on this, Charmaine?
So there were no pre-registered speakers for this item this evening. However, I would like to ask, are there any members of the public connected to this Zoom meeting who would like to provide comment? If you're connected with a computer, please use the raise hand function. If you're connected with your telephone, the prompt is *9. Again, raise hand or *9 if connected via phone. And Mayor, there is no one indicating they would like to speak.
Okay, so is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. So let's go ahead to council discussion and action. I believe everybody is unmuted. So is there anybody who would like to ask a question or make a statement about this? Let me know.
Mayor, I did have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Zahn.
Yeah, so I noticed in here, thank you for the list, that there are several vehicles and the newest one is 2011. So do we have a policy around how long we keep vehicles? So these are surplus, meaning that they're not in use anymore, or they were replaced with a different vehicle?
I'll start and I'll have Tom also jump in and help answer the question. So depending on the class of vehicle, there is a replacement cycle of how many years we would keep the vehicle based on the performance of that asset class. And so these vehicles will be replaced with, these vehicles are all at the end of their useful life and have met the expected life for the type of vehicle that they are, and will be replaced with new vehicles. And Tom, would you like to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Deputy, and council members. The particular vehicle the council member asked about, that particular one has 128,000 miles on it. And we look at the cost of ownership related to depreciation and the cost of maintenance. So as they get older, they become more costly to maintain. And we also run into issues with parts obsolescence as well. So it's part of the decisions that we use in replacing the vehicles.
Okay, because the reason I was asking is I know that we are looking at our operating costs and trying to make sure that we are reducing costs wherever we can. And so I just wanted to understand the timing of this. And is this one of those areas where not purchasing another replacement vehicle right away would make sense related to COVID cost savings?
That's a great question. Yeah, keeping this particular vehicle or any of these vehicles that reach the end of their useful life do pose a risk of higher cost to the city.
Okay, I see.
Thank you. Are there any more questions or comments?
Mayor, I
Mayor.
have one quick question.
Okay, tell you what
I have a
then,
question too.
we will go through everybody. That's fine. So, council members on, Councilmember Lee, I'm gonna have you go next.
Thank you very much. I noticed that there are computers that would be surplus, 22 of them. Has there been any consideration to donate these computers to needed people, folks, students? Because I recall that during this COVID-19, we're thinking of doing online education, and some of the input I get as well, some kids don't have computers, because the school's out, so they don't have access to it. So is this something that we have ever looked into, or something that's feasible?
Councilmember Lee, I need to get back to you on that. The assets that are declared surplus is disposed of by finance and asset management. And I don't know if that's a specific area that they have looked into, but I can look into that opportunity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Stokes, would you like to
No,
ask?
I don't have any questions. I think this is a staff issue, and I think they've laid it out pretty well. I'm happy with it.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Noonhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, my question was along the same lines as Councilmember Lee. I was just wondering if there was any priority for nonprofits to have first ability to take advantage of either the vehicles, but any of the equipment, quite frankly. I was just wondering if that is a priority, or is it first come, first serve, or just to maximize the amount of money that the city can get for these surplus items?
And I will look into that question as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Barksdale.
My question has been addressed. It was around the donation of the computers and items for nonprofits or students. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Robertson.
Hi, thanks. This is pretty routine. I think we have these surplus legislation about every 3 to 5 years, and we surplus the items and then they're sold under as they're required to be under state law. I guess I'll ask a question just for clarification. With regard to these items, it's a utility account. And so my inkling would be that we can't donate them even if we wanted to, because they were purchased with ratepayers' funds. And so they have to be sold for the fair market value, because otherwise we're donating ratepayer money. Is staff ready to address that issue?
Yes, these items will need to be sold at fair market value. The value, though, of the fair market value of the desktop computers are relatively low. They're about $2 to $3, and we can look at so that needs to be sold at whatever fair market value would be, and then we could look into the question of whether there could be a priority for nonprofit organizations. Sure. To take advantage of those. Thank you for the clarifying question.
Yeah, that would be great, because utility property is different than other property, which can be donated usually more easily because it's not rate based. But anyway, I'm ready to move ahead and pass this. Let staff dispose of these as they see fit under the state law.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor, would you like to make a motion?
Certainly. I move to adopt Resolution 9800, declaring certain utility-owned property and equipment as surplus and directing the Director of Finance and Asset Management to dispose of such property.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, and that resolution passes. So now we have Resolution 9801. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce that?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. This is a public hearing authorizing the partial release of a utility easement. This easement is being released as part of Sound Transit's Eastlink construction on property they own at 13804 Northeast 20th Street. Again, following the public hearing, Council will be asked to take action on the proposed Resolution 9801 to release the portion of the easement. Joining this evening for a brief staff report is Ira McDaniel, Rural Property Manager, as well as Sean Wells from the Utilities Department. Ira?
Thank you, Mr. Miyake, and good evening, Mayor and council members. As the city manager said, this first staff report is on a request to release a portion of water easement at 13804 Northeast 20th Street. And tonight's public hearing is to allow the public an opportunity to comment on the proposed release. Next slide, please. This map shows the location of the property where the easement's located in purple. It's off of Northeast 20th, just west of 140th Avenue Northeast. And we'll zoom in on that. Next slide, please. So this is a property that's owned by Sound Transit for construction of East Link, and we had a water pipeline that conflicted with their construction. Sound Transit relocated that line within their property, and they've requested that we release a portion of the old water easement to reflect this change in location. The portion that will be released is shown in the orange crosshatching, and the new easement will be as shown in green to cover the new facilities that have been relocated. Next slide. Following the public hearing, staff requests council action on the proposed resolution authorizing the partial release of the easement. And this ends our staff report. Are there any questions before opening the public hearing?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead. Oh, okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there a motion to do that?
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, go ahead. Do we have some public testimony, Charmaine?
Again, Mayor, there were no pre-registered speakers for tonight's public hearing on this easement. However, I do see several members of the public connected to this call, so I need to ask if there are members from the public who would like to provide comment. Please use the raise hand function if you're connected with a computer, and *9 if you are connected with your phone. I will pause. Mayor, I do not see anyone indicating they would like to speak.
Okay, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, so I'll go in order, starting with Councilmember Zahn.
I don't have any comments.
Okay, Councilmember Lee.
Just curious, what does this release accomplish at this time? Is there any action, anything to happen to this piece of property?
What it would accomplish is basically just a clearing of title for Sound Transit. So since they moved the water line from the old location and are giving us the new easement, they would have two easements, if you will, across their property. So by releasing this portion, that will clean that up so that they only have the one.
Okay, but that's not any action contemplated or anything that's going to happen here. It's just a matter of, making some legal documentation change. Okay, right?
Correct. Yes,
Yeah,
the water line has been relocated. Yep.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stokes.
No, I'm fine.
Deputy Mayor Noonhouse.
No questions or comments.
Councilmember Barksdale.
No comments or questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Robertson.
Nothing at this time. Good to go.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, would you like to make a motion?
Certainly, I move to adopt Resolution 9801, authorizing the execution of documents necessary to release a portion of an existing water easement located at 13804 Northeast 20th Street, which has been declared surplus to the city's needs and is no longer required for providing continued public utility service.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so that resolution passes. All right, we have a third resolution, 9802, Mr. Miyake.
Thank you, Mayor Robertson. So this next one is a public hearing authorizing the partial release of a utility easement. This particular easement is being released as part of a redevelopment project located at 12863 Northup Way. Again, following the public hearing, council will be asked to take action on the proposed resolution 9802, release the portion of the easement. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ira.
Thank you. So this is, again, an opportunity for the public to comment on the proposed release. Next slide. This one is located a little bit to the west of the last one. It's off of Northup Way at just west of 130th, as shown in purple. We're going to zoom in sort of on the northern portion of this property. Charmaine, if you will. So the property is being redeveloped, and a portion of our old water line, which is shown in the red cross hatching, is in conflict with a proposed mixed-use residential building. The water line is going to be relocated to the south into the area shown in green, where a new easement will be provided to the city. And as part of the permitting process, the owner has requested that we partially release the old water easement. Next slide. So again, following the public hearing, we'll request action on the proposed resolution authorizing the partial release of the easement. Are there any questions?
Okay, Deputy Mayor, would you like to open the public hearing?
Sure, I move to open the public hearing.
There a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. City Clerk, do we have any public testimony?
Again, Mayor, there are no speakers pre-registered for this topic. I would again ask if there is any member of the public on this call who would like to provide comment. Please use the raised hand function in Zoom or *9 if you're connected with your phone. And Mayor, I do not see anyone indicating they wish to speak.
Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, so I'll just run through the order. Council members on, see if any of you have questions or comments. Council members on.
No comments.
Council member Lee.
No question, no comment.
Council member Stokes.
No comments.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis.
No questions or comments.
Council member Barksdale.
Comments. Thank you.
Council member Robertson.
Nothing at this time.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, would you like to make a motion?
Certainly, I move to adopt Resolution 9802, authorizing the execution of documents necessary to release a portion of an existing waterline easement located at 12863 Northrop Way, which has been declared surplus of the city's needs and is no longer required for providing continued public utility service.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes. Thank you very much. Okay, next we have our study session item, which I'm very excited to see come before us tonight. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Robertson and council members. The matter in front of you tonight is related to the Affordable Housing Strategy C1 action. Just by specifically, the goal of the C1 action is to deliver more affordable housing units through an incentive-based approach on land owned by public, nonprofit housing, and faith-based entities. By way of background, this matter was last in front of the council in March of this year. And at that time, council directed staff to bring this matter back to you, which is tonight. This evening, staff is requesting council to direct the initiation of a comp plan amendment and land use code amendment to the Planning Commission. And joining us this evening is Emil King, our Assistant Director, Tara Johnson, Comprehensive Planning Manager, and Janet Lewine, Senior Planner, all of the Community Development Department. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Emil.
Thank you, City Manager Miyake. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members to council. Staff are here tonight to move forward with one of the key actions from the 2017 Affordable Housing Strategy. C1 is one of the 21 actions within the plan and is part of the Create More Affordable Housing Strategy area. We're ready to begin the technical work and outreach based on tonight's council direction. We've seen interest from some of the Bellevue's faith-based landowners in adding more affordable housing. There are also corporate funders ready to assist projects on the east side. In addition, we have the state legislation with House Bill 1377 that was mentioned in the public comment that provides guidance to cities for affordable housing density incentives in certain circumstances. Next slide, please, Charmaine. Staff are seeking the following direction tonight. We'd like to initiate work on the C1 action. As the city manager mentioned, it's an incentive-based approach for increasing development potential on public, nonprofit housing, and faith-based entities for affordable housing. It would involve two key items of direction from the council tonight. Number one, to initiate a comprehensive plan amendment to allow for density incentives on eligible properties. We'll go into a bit more detail on what that comprehensive plan amendment would entail. And number two, it would have council initiation of a land use code amendment, or LUCA for short, regarding the development regulations and criteria for these density incentives for affordable housing. Staff recommends that this work be done by the city's planning commission and brought back to the council for consideration for adoption. Next slide, please, Charmaine. Tonight, you'll hear from two of our staff housing leads during a short presentation. Janet Lamine, you know well from previous work on affordable housing in the city, and Tara Johnson is our new comprehensive planning manager who joined the city in early May. We'll be covering our approach for analysis and review of the C1 work. We've thought through what we believe to be an efficient and effective approach to create more affordable housing. We have a map in your packet of qualifying properties that will be part of the analysis. I'd also like to note that the map that we show tonight in the presentation does have one amendment, and that we've added the East Bellevue Community Council boundary to that map. But aside from that, it's the same one that's in the packet. You will notice that our map does focus on areas outside of the growth corridor of downtown Bel-Red and Eastgate, and you did receive public comment tonight about the extent of what analysis you'd like this work to do. Our next item is going to be a bit of detail on the exact comprehensive plan amendment that we'd like to focus on in the housing element, as well as the general approach for the land use code amendment process. And we'll conclude with an overall outreach plan and conclude with a work program timeline. Next slide, please. At this point, I'd like to hand things over to Tara Johnson to continue with the staff presentation.
Thank you, Emil. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, council members, members of the public that are present here today. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, my first presentation before you, and opportunity to at least meet you virtually and hopefully at some point in person. Tonight, as Emil indicated, it is our intent to provide an overview of the proposed approach with the Action C1 strategy, and as well as to receive direction from you this evening. So just to provide a little bit of background and context, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, City Council adopted the Affordable Housing Strategy in 2017, which incorporates a total of 5 strategies and has an associated 21 actions that go along with it. One of the primary goals in the Affordable Housing Strategy is to create 2,500 additional affordable housing units in a period of 10 years. And specifically, which is a pretty ambitious goal, and specifically Action C1 calls out a requirement to increase development potential on land that's owned by public nonprofit housing and faith-based entities for affordable housing. This can make a significant contribution towards achieving this goal. During development of the Affordable Housing Strategy in 2017, the technical advisory group that did a lot of work surrounding coming up with these strategies and goals estimated that between 200 and 1,000 affordable housing units could be added to the city's housing stock by implementing the strategy. Next slide, please, Charmaine. Thank you. I'd also like to just provide a little bit of history and recap some of the earlier discussions that staff has had relating to the C1 strategy. My understanding is in February of 2018, staff provided the council with an introduction on a different approach to the C1 strategy. And at this time, the approach provided for an increased number of units to be developed within the same height, setback, and lot coverage standards of certain eligible properties, but the focus was multifamily and commercial zones. At this meeting, council members expressed some concern with the increased density being proposed and also recommended that the discussion be deferred until the end of the legislative session, since there was a bill at the time being considered within the state legislature relating to public nonprofit housing and faith-based entities. And we've talked about that, touched on that briefly, and we'll talk more in more detail about that shortly. In addition, we also came back to council earlier this year in March of 2020 to provide the council with an update on the affordable housing strategy. And we indicated that we would be coming back to you with a specific proposal relating to C1 within a 3 to 6 month period. And so now we're back here tonight presenting you with information. Next slide, please, Charmaine. Emil indicated this, and staff, and this has been very apparent over the last couple of years. We've been having conversations with various stakeholder groups in the community. We've also been approached by a number of faith-based property owners and nonprofit developers expressing an interest to develop affordable housing on portions of their property that's been underutilized. We've also had some conversations with folks from the school district. We've also spoken with Sound Transit, of course, as well as local businesses who've also expressed support for promoting more opportunities for affordable housing. Next slide, please, Charmaine. Despite this very apparent interest, we have not seen very many opportunities move forward coming in through the pipeline for affordable housing projects. And this is primarily due to the existing zoning and allowable density that we have in place in our current regulations, which do not provide the mechanism for redevelopment to be economically feasible for affordable housing to be constructed. Affordable housing developers and nonprofits have expressed that they find it challenging to find available land in Bellevue, and they rely quite significantly on public-private partnerships with faith groups or even government entities rather than redeveloping property all on their own. In addition, a site-by-site approach results in a multi-year process, as you know, which requires both a comprehensive plan amendment as well as associated code amendments. And then what that brings with it is a potential for significant discourse with the surrounding neighborhood. However, taking a more of a holistic approach and looking at this from a citywide perspective will result in greater predictability and therefore result in a more efficient timeline. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Janet, and she's going to walk you through some of the specifics of the C1 proposal. Next slide, please, Charmaine.
Good evening. This is Janet Lewine. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Nieuwenhuis, council members. I'm also very excited to be presenting tonight and starting this affordable housing strategy action. The recommended C1 approach is to launch a one-time comp plan and land use code amendment. Establishing a new density bonus in the code is a more predictable and efficient approach for the public, nonprofit housing, and faith groups who want to add additional density and develop affordable housing. It is proposed that this would be a new section to the city's existing affordable housing incentive. The existing incentive now gives a limited density increase, mainly targeted to developers who might include a small number of affordable units within a market project. The C1 code incentive is proposed to give a greater density increase for eligible properties that meet new city policy and the recent state legislation and that are developing all affordable projects. As mentioned, the C1 bonus is not needed in Bell Red, Downtown, or Eastgate because these sections of the code have been recently updated to include very good affordable housing incentives. For example, in Bell Red, affordable homes are not counted against the limit of the floor area ratio. And that effectively sets no limit to the number of affordable units that could be achieved. Next slide, please. And again, the State House Bill 1377, which was passed in last year, it is an attachment in the memo, and it's fairly short. It directs cities to provide a density bonus for affordable housing on faith-owned properties. There is flexibility in the legislation in setting the amount of that bonus, consistent with local needs. To set an appropriate density bonus, the C1 work program includes property and needs analysis and outreach with stakeholders and neighborhood groups. Next slide. The initial proposal for C1 qualifying properties is in multifamily and mixed-use residential districts, public surplus properties, nonprofit housing property, and faith-owned property, and in single-family residential districts, faith-owned property. The council memo attachment lists potential properties in those 4 categories, and a map shows the distribution of those properties across the city. Next slide. This slide shows the top portion of the map attachment to show the distribution of potential sites north of I-90 in the city. EBCC is outlined in red. The dots are colored for the 4 categories of properties. Next slide. This slide shows the distribution of potential sites south of I-90. Our initial property search found 136 sites across the city. Now that's not 136 different property owners. Some property owners have multiple sites. But be clear, not all of these qualifying properties will elect to develop affordable housing. This is the universe of potential sites that a bonus would apply to if they came to the city to develop 100% affordable properties. Next slide, please. C1 is one of the 21 actions in the city's adopted affordable housing strategy. To implement this action will require a comprehensive plan amendment, or CPA, and a land use code amendment. The comprehensive plan amendment would be a policy in the city's comprehensive planned housing element, and that policy would support a density incentive on faith, housing nonprofit, and public surplus land. Next slide. The Land Use Code Amendment, or LUCA, needed to implement C1. That would establish the density increase and the qualifying properties. It is proposed that this would be a new section in the city's existing affordable housing incentive. Property and needs analysis will be completed before proposing the density increase or amount of density increase for qualifying properties. Next slide. The proposed outreach process includes public engagement through the annual CPA work program and the code amendment process in our code, Planning Commission review and public hearings, East Bellevue Community Council review, notification and outreach to property owners and of the potentially qualifying properties, and outreach to other housing and neighborhood stakeholders. We will do a broad outreach for this important incentive. And next, I would like to turn it back to Emil, and he will discuss timelines and implementation.
Next slide, please, Charmaine. Thanks, Janet. So again, tonight we're here to initiate the staff work on the comprehensive plan amendment and LUCA. We see that we can schedule this with the Planning Commission for a lot of the work to occur during the fall. That would include review, analysis, public hearings, and the recommendation. The comprehensive plan amendment would be part of the annual amendment process, which typically has policies and map amendments for the privately initiated amendments coming back to council in the December time period. And we do think that the code amendments would be ready for council adoption in early 2021. Next slide, please. And this is just a graphic representation of the bullets going from now on the left-hand side over to late 2021. Next slide, please, Charmaine. So again, the direction that we're looking for from council tonight is twofold. One is to initiate the comprehensive plan amendment, and the second is to initiate the land use code amendment and for both of those to have them go through the city's planning commission. That concludes the staff presentation. And if you'd like to direct questions to me, Mayor, I can either answer them myself or direct them to the appropriate staff that we have on the line. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask in this order: Councilmember Stokes, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, Councilmember Barksdale, Robertson, Zahn, Lee, and then myself. So starting with Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is, can't tell you how exciting this is. This was a big piece that we talked about back in 16, 17, we were working on this, and that's a cute picture there, our caps, our hats. And we had struggled with exactly how to approach particularly the faith-based properties, and we really didn't have it quite together at that point, and we probably lost a couple opportunities, but there are others out there. So this is a very, I think, a very logical and a positive development, and I applaud staff for really digging into this and coming up with an approach that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we've set a very strong policy on this. We've talked in all these different areas, and what we're talking about now is how do we actually implement those. And and as we've looked at other things in terms of the comprehensive plan amendments and all, this is consistent with our, I think, focus now to be a little more nimble, to be a little more, I think, in terms of doing business and providing for a lot of more certainty to not string things out and not have too many things that are piecemeal, and putting this together to look at these different areas and encourage this, I think is very good. And then having the LUCA set up and going through the planning commission, and in a very, I think it's a fast but also a very rational time frame, and I really am pleased with that and hope we can get that done in time. Also encouraged by the fact that our partners in the community, Microsoft, Chamber of Commerce, NAIOP, and individuals are supporting this and believe that this is a very positive step forward. I think it will put us back in, which I think we've a little bit given up the lead in working on affordable housing in the east side, in the region, the county. And I think this will enable us to do things in a more effective, efficient manner and actually get a lot more people housed. And I think the thing that is also good about this, and it's implementing the state legislation, which will help, and it also sets this up so that, and in talking to Imagine Housing and all the others that are involved in affordable housing, it will be a piece that will actually facilitate their ability to go out and do what they do best, and that's build these houses and manage them. I think one thing we've learned in that short time from the 17 to here with both St. Margaret's and St. Andrews. St. Andrews have been there for a while, but that having affordable housing units are compatible with being in the vicinity of or part of a neighborhood. We also know that half of the people in Bellevue or more actually live in multifamily housing. So that's changing somewhat. And even, like in my neighborhood, there are a lot of apartments around us. So the idea of having both and we don't really know sometimes where low-cost housing is located. As you saw that list that the King County Housing Authority has, they're in a lot of places. So it really is allowing us to develop throughout the city in a way and take advantage of, and of course the cost and all of that is so, that's the most difficult part of this. And so we're actually, again, fulfilling that promise that we made, that we would find ways to be able to encourage and get more affordable housing built. And we have a very aggressive number we're working on. The King County Housing Affordable Plan is we're talking about a lot of units, and we're not really getting close to what need is in the long run, but it's a huge step. So I'm very excited about it. I don't have any questions about this. I don't feel the need to question staff about why they do this or that or that, because I think we have set the policy. This is the following the policy, allowing us and showing us how we can implement the policy. And it's going to be a lot of room for conversation. We're going out to the community. The Planning Commission will work on this, and we'll have various touches going forward. So tonight, I want to say that I'm very excited about this. It kind of fulfills what I was hoping we would be doing when we talked as part of it back in 2016, 17. And let's get it going. And thanks very much to the staff. Great work, great presentation, and I'm just excited to see it come into place.
Thank you, Councilmember Stokes. Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, first of all, Emil, Janet, Thara, great job, great presentation. Thara, you did great. Wouldn't have known that was your first presentation, so great job. Like Councilmember Stokes just mentioned, I'm very excited moving forward on this. It's got broad support across all the various different community sectors, be it the business, nonprofits, and those that manage affordable housing units. So it's a great next step in our strategy. A couple of quick questions. So first, and I think this might be directed towards Janet on outreach, which I feel is really important, especially which is not a pitfall per se, but one area which does give me a little bit concern is the in the single family districts, residential districts on faith-based properties there. So I think in particular there, the outreach needed to the surrounding neighborhoods, I think is really critical. So can you give me just a few specific tactics we're going to do to make sure that we're reaching as many residents as possible in some of these situations?
Janet, you want to go ahead and address that one, please?
Yes, I can. I think we've learned a lot from our neighborhood area planning on how to do outreach, both going out into the neighborhoods and engaging them on what's going on and what's planned in their areas, and doing that virtually as well. So we're going to take those lessons, work with the professionals that we have on staff, and take the good that we've learned and really put it into this project so that we get excellent outreach and input into this proposal.
Great to hear. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also had a quick question, and this is partly for the public, but also as a liaison to the EBCC. Emil, could you just walk through the steps in terms of including the EBCC in this process?
Of course, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
So the EBCC boundary that was shown on the first of those graphics is an area that we do have, we pay special attention to. We're going to begin the outreach with the East Bellevue Community Council in the early stages. So we intend to, with council direction, start engaging over the second part of the summer into the fall. So you're going to have targeted outreach to members of the EBCC and people who live out there. We typically do a what's called a courtesy public hearing with the EBCC prior to the Planning Commission hearing. So we go out and actually have a hearing with them, hear what the EBCC has to say. That information is then given to the Planning Commission for consideration. When the council ultimately adopts something of this type, they do have the ratification process that does happen afterwards, where they can kind of approve or deny the legislation within that boundary of the EBCC. So those are all the steps that would go into it. Our hope is that we can find solutions for affordable housing density incentives that are appropriate for all the areas of the city would be our initial goal going into it, with the special provisions of the EBCC in mind.
Terrific. Thanks, Emil. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Barksdale.
Mayor, thanks, Emil, Tara, and Janet for the great work that you're doing and for the good presentation. I support this. I just had one question. The range is pretty broad, 200 to 1,000 units. Any what would you say are the factors that influence that, and anything that we can do to nudge it to the higher number?
Janet, would you like to talk a little bit about the analysis that went in to come up with that number, and then I can add on some insights I have to it, please?
Sure. One of the interesting aspects of the affordable housing strategy was each action was analyzed. We had consultants and in staff to look at the efficacy, what kind of affordability they could reach, what kind of timeline, and how many units we might get from that action. So this one is especially broad because we weren't really able to measure how many churches would elect to use this incentive if it were offered. However, we could look in the past and see that we have a half a dozen or less that have churches specifically that have done affordable housing on their property, and look at that forward. But we would certainly hope that more faith community and nonprofit and the city would get together and participate if this incentive were available. So it probably goes from what we've seen in the past on the low end, if that would continue, and if this incentive could nudge people to, it would not be as risky to have this development on their site, then we could get up into the bigger numbers. Emil?
Yeah, just to add on to that, Councilmember Barksdale, some of the example sites that we have seen out there typically deliver something in the range of 40 to 50 or 60 units. There are projects of all different sizes for affordable housing, but if you use something around 50 for maybe the middle size of a project, that's showing about 4 projects. So our thought is the low end is maybe a handful of these projects occurring. And then clearly to get up to something that is 5 times that number, it needs to be a very well thought out incentive that does actually have entities who are wanting to use it. And then just by nature of the faith-based properties and other properties wanting to do something with their property over a number of years. So you can kind of get a feel for maybe a handful of projects on the low end to maybe a dozen or more projects on the upper end.
Okay, thank you. And I know that there's ongoing communication with the different stakeholders, including the faith institutions and developers, to figure out how to find the right incentive to encourage more development. So I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Robertson.
Yes, I also support sending this to the Planning Commission. I have some comments about how I'd like to see this develop, as well as some questions. So first, I think in order for this to be successful, it needs to be carefully tailored. When the Bellevue Council upzoned downtown, Bellred, and the discussion about Wilburton, the promise was that we would put the growth there so that it wouldn't bleed into all of the neighborhoods. And now we're talking about potentially 132, I think, properties citywide, some in single family neighborhoods, adding density up to 1,000 units or more on property that's not zoned for that. So I think it needs to be carefully handled. I think the goal of more affordable housing is valuable. We have always, when a church has come to the council and wanted to rezone, to usually go one zone, they usually have been allowed to go one zone up to put an affordable housing project. As many of you know, I was involved with the St. Margaret's Housing Group. I was their advisor on that before I was on council, and helped them do that. They were not allowed to go to the zone they wanted. They were only allowed to go one notch up. I think they wanted a mixed use zone, and they weren't allowed to do that, but what they did worked really well in St. Andrews. St. Andrews Glen is an exceptional project. So I think that this can work really well, but it needs to be handled deftly. So to that end, I think that where we're looking at property that's in single family zones, it needs to be really not much more than is required by state law as far as density. I would support having bookends on the amount of density, including going one zone up, having scale and scope restrictions. And that also would be appropriate in multifamily zones that are in transition areas where it's transitioning from single family to multifamily. I know we have specific landscaping that goes on those, et cetera. So we want to make sure that those transitions are handled well. I really think we should also consider differentiating properties that are just generally single family, multifamily zones and properties that are near high capacity transit corridors. If they have frequent transit, those ones should be prioritized because those just work better, or that are on major arterials or near, collector distributor arterials, but the road capacity also will matter. To that end, my first question for staff is, I know that we have to do SEPA when we do changes to the land use code. Will we be looking at the transportation impacts of this potential comp plan and land use code as part of the analysis?
So I'll go ahead and answer that one, Councilmember Robertson. So we will be doing SEPA on this project as we would for any comprehensive plan amendment and land use code amendment. We will be doing something similar to when we're looking at potential density changes for property. We generally can estimate what could happen under existing zoning, and we can also look at as you described, kind of the bookends of potential redevelopment on properties. In our transportation model, we also know what we've forecast in different traffic analysis zones that are spread throughout the city. So we can easily look at what potential density increases under this C1 action would mean compared to what I'm going to call our baseline forecast for development in different parts of the city. So I think we are able technically to look at that lens of things from a transportation standpoint. And then we, as you know, through the interim ordinance for parking, we have a very good frequent transit network map that we can have that lens applied to our work as well from a transit standpoint.
Great, and this should work together with that. I think that having the parcels that are near high capacity transit be the ones that get more density that are not in single family neighborhoods, that I think would be the best thing for the city, for our transportation system, and for the future residents of these affordable units where they can get to where they need to go. Okay, so I'm wondering, and I know we're talking about the comp plan right now, but I'm looking ahead to the land use code. Are we looking at changing the zoning on all of these 132 parcels as part of the land use code, or is this going to be a mostly citywide overlay that allows properties, meeting certain criteria to have a bonus?
Staff thinks that it is going to be best to have this as a bonus available for properties that qualify and not go do property by property so-called rezones at this point. So we view it similar to land use code part 20/128. We do mention that in the council packet. So that's the approach that we would like to use, where it's a affordable housing incentive, and property owners who meet certain criteria can use it as they see fit.
Great. I think that's really appropriate, because if we did a property by property rezone based on the ownership today, that could be out of date, and those could be sold to for-profit developers or whatnot, and then it wouldn't meet the criteria that we're envisioning today. So I'm glad that we're looking at it more in terms of a bonus or an overlay across part of the city. Okay, two final questions two final comments on outreach. I appreciated Deputy Mayor commenting about the outreach. To the extent that we have parcels that are in single family zones, I'd like to make sure that the people who live around those are very much aware of what's going on. So I think we need citywide outreach and or neighborhood specific outreach, because this is a big policy issue, and we're in COVID right now. We're not meeting in City Hall. We're not having people come and talk to us, come down to us, let us see the whites of their eyes and communicate with us. And then the planning commission's in that same condition. So I think more outreach We need to err on the side of more and trying to make sure that people can communicate back. And finally, I think that it would be really wise for us to communicate to our school districts, because what we are planning with potential up zones happening around the city is something they need to be aware of, because they are always planning too. And Bellevue School District is a growing district, so is Issaquah. I think Renton is as well, and they need to be aware so that as they're planning for their next phase, they should be aware of what the potential growth is in Bellevue. So I would encourage that to happen as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Robertson. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. So appreciative of the work of staff. I mean, it's a lot of work to create the map and the listing of all of the properties and the inventory. So thank you for doing that. I am supportive of this approach and really excited that we are working on making sure we have multiple tools to build affordable housing and really right sizing it in partnership with the nonprofits, the faith community, the developers to make things happen. When I looked at the list, it looked like for the most part, the City of Bellevue properties, the sum of those are probably around 5 acres. There's some in multifamily, but it looks like most of the acreage is in single family. And I think that while we look at the whole strategy, which is that we have our density in our downtown or transit-oriented development, the multifamily areas, I also think that when we can right-size the development of some of these faith-based properties in the single-family neighborhoods, because at this price range, what we're also talking about is the potential to have folks that actually work in our community, live in our community, folks like teachers that may have a couple of children that their income falls into this category. So I'm super excited about that. I did have a couple of questions, and that is that we did get some comments that came in, and I wanted to understand, as the Planning Commission looks at this, will they look at how this dovetails with the MFTE that is already in City Code?
I can go ahead and answer that one. So 2 elements of that. We do have our existing MFTE that has the residential target areas. We have direction from the City Council to come back and initiate work on expansion of the MFTE, so-called citywide. So we're planning to come back to the council in mid-September with a proposed approach for some additional analysis, but generally some different options on how to expand it citywide. So we would be looking at dovetailing that work that we hope to have launched in mid-September with this ongoing work on the C1. So they do interface, provided that right now only parts of the city have the MFT in effect, but we do have direction to so-called extend that citywide.
Okay, and my other question is, I understand that right now we have excluded the downtown Bel-Red and Eastgate TOD areas. How many more properties would potentially be part of this review if we included that? And are there actually faith properties in those 3 areas where there is that potential? Always thinking about the fact that we are still working on right sizing. There will be the public engagement to understand what the right fit is for the different neighborhoods.
Yeah, council members on, I don't have the number at the top of my head about the difference, but there are a number of properties in the downtown that are public, faith-owned, or nonprofit. Some of them are built out, so-called, like the August Wilson Place and some of the other affordable housing developments. But there are also, for example, existing church sites within the downtown. Same thing goes for Eastgate and the Bel-Red area. You did receive public comment tonight with the question: should we be expanding this work to include those areas where we already have density and incentives for affordable housing. We were trying to take an approach where we were focusing on the areas where probably we needed the focused analysis. I think, as Councilmember Robertson correctly pointed out, there is quite a bit of work just in analyzing the mixed-use zones, multifamily zones, and single-family zones outside of the growth corridors. If the council majority did want us to go add those areas into the process, it's something that we could do, but we do have a large body of work just to address the areas outside of the growth corridor at this point.
So how much more time would it take if we did include that? And the main reason I'm asking is because I think that we did talk about with the community focusing density in the areas near transit. So I just wanted to understand the trade-off of time versus adding that scope.
Right. I think it would add a bit more time on, I think, let's call it the land use code amendment portion of it. I think from a policy standpoint, clearly we have good policy in Bellevue, downtown, the Eastgate area for affordable housing, because we did that work for Bellevue when we were doing the incentive system. I think it could potentially add a bit more in developing the specific land use code amendments that would dovetail with the density bonus that we have out there. So to kind of add something on that works in addition or in tandem, I think, as the public comment noted, could be a good thing, but we want to make sure we get it right and those work together and aren't at counter purposes. So I think it would potentially add a little bit more work to draft the land use code amendments for those areas.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Zahn. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sarah, welcome to Bellevue. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Well, affordable housing has always been a challenge for the city of Bellevue because Bellevue is such a desirable place. Everybody wants to come live here, so the cost is always high. So I'm really glad that we are actually getting down to making some real good progress. Because we recognize the importance of accommodating people who want to work and live and raise family here. And so thanks for the staff working so hard, and the council has the persistence. And however, I want to be sure that we do it right. I agree that we need to look at this. We need to initiate this process. We need to try to meet the council goal and then refer to Planning Commission to do it. Yes, I'm ready to do that. The question is, I have some questions. When I was briefed by the staff, I raised the question, are we doing this just for the specific property that's identified? Or are we going to do this as a broad land use plan and and that will apply to all the future properties, potential properties that can be used as a affordable housing with this incentive. Because we heard the staff presentation. I think we believe to do this, we have to be specific. This plan is specific, yet very broad. We're talking about a goal of 200 to 1,000 units, okay? But then we're talking about we want to have a goal of 2,500 in 10 years. I think this is all very good. So my question is, are we targeting eligible properties just so that we can see how much we can accomplish? Or, as very well put by Councilmember Robertson, and also, Deputy Mayor, that single-family neighborhoods and the church properties, religious, properties. That could be here today or gone tomorrow, or perhaps there'll be more tomorrow. In 10 years, I don't know what it would be. Is this something that we need to be aware of, be careful that, the things that we're talking about, the rules that we are making, that applies to something that we know what is our goal. And if it isn't, because we want to have a tool, we want a tool that works, that applies. And this, I think, we're working toward that. And I believe we are making the step to find the right tools. This is one of the very effective tools. But I want to be sure that we don't have an intended consequence to apply a powerful tool to not be what I used to word, to be responsive, to whatever the affordable housing picture will look like in the future. I think because we want to, the things that we're doing, everything we're doing, I think I like it, is to create density incentive, create more affordable housing. But I didn't hear that it's going to be limited to what the period of time, limited to how many units, because I don't know what are we looking at, what the future will be, and how does this tool we're working on, it's going to be applicable to that. It's going to be limited or whatever. So that's my only concern. So I want to be sure that we are addressing the problem specifically. We're having a tool through this CPA and LUCA, and we have a program that will accomplish what we want to accomplish. And of course, all goals, all objectives can be revised as we move along. But I don't want to just, apply automatically that we have a policy that's going to change the whole community without the opportunity to say, hey, where do we have a checkpoint? That's the reason I believe it's very important. We need to look at and talk to, engage our single family neighborhoods, because ultimately it's still that neighborhood that provides the core of the city, So I think it's important. And I noticed that in the outreach so far, you haven't really included the neighborhoods, so it's okay, as long as we make the effort to make sure that we do include single family neighborhoods, let them understand, know how, and what we want to accomplish. I believe that we all support that, as long as we know, what we are going to accomplish and know, and then from there on. But if we provide a overall program and just with unlimited opportunity, for example, if I'm a nonprofit or a church, or I'm not a nonprofit, I'm a nonprofit, I want to build affordable housing, I can go to a neighborhood, to an area that we are identified, we are approved as the CPA. I can buy property there. I go in there. I say, well, I'm going to use this as a church, and then I can use it for my affordable housing project. That is abusing, I think, the intention, the rule that we are making. And I don't think that's something that I'd be concerned with. So I think it's important that we know this is a tool, and the tool will accomplish that. And this is a land use code that will give us that tool to accomplish just that purpose. And obviously it doesn't say it's all cast and concrete, we know that. But I would want to make sure that we have that conversation with the single family neighborhoods. And so I think people understand what are we doing, what we're getting into, and what we're going to accomplish. Otherwise, we're going to be, difficult to answer some of the questions may be raised, and also the concern that what does the future lie ahead of us. So I talked to, again, email, and we had a conversation. So I hope you understand what I'm saying. I understand you have some opportunity to look at the CPA, look at the LUCA, and how can we do it in such a way that we actually deliver what we think that we're going to do the best we know how, and then without having the opportunity of, being overdo it or whatever it may not be. It's all just concern. So maybe the first question or the last question I should ask is, are we just looking at the 132 pieces of properties very specifically, or are we doing this a blank on blank? Just a total land use, like I believe one of the council member mentioned. Maybe we're going to any other area, and then we can make it as a property that fits under this condition. Then we can do whatever we want to do with it. And such as, I think Jennifer mentioned that. That's why downtown change, land use change, we have some concerns. What happens? How is it limited without getting infringing upon, whatever the existing neighborhood might be concerned with. So I hope I make a point across. Thank you.
Yes, I can go ahead and
go ahead and answer the question. Yeah.
So we, Councilmember Robertson early asked about, are we going to go preemptively upzone things based on this list? And the answer to that is absolutely not. So we're not upzoning properties with the opportunity for them to kind of change their ownership, but then still have the upzone. So you need to be a qualifying property to use this incentive-based overlay. So that I hope we're clear about. We also have a robust engagement plan for the single-family properties. I think we've all noted that this is something different for those areas. I think there's a lot of good policy direction and reasons to do this work, but there is going to need to be that kind of close interaction, especially with the single-family neighborhoods. The last note that you brought up about what universe of properties are we looking at? So that is a very interesting facet of this. We have a good knowledge of what properties fit these different categories. We've mapped them. We have them in the table. As we noted, there's a lot of frequent transit level analysis, the traffic analysis. There's a lot of analysis we can do on these properties. What we do want to work out during the policy work with the Planning Commission and in close consultation with the City Attorney's Office is what about properties that might fall under these ownership categories in the future that we don't know about now. So I'm in agreement with you, Councilmember Lee, that there is some unknown when we're doing this analysis for an overlay, because we only know what we know now about these properties. So that is a key thing that we want to make sure that council is kept up to date on how we're thinking about that. And clearly it's going to be a point of kind of public dialogue about, number one, fully analyzing clearly everything we have on our list, but what do we do about future properties that might fit this criteria? So we do not have the final answer on that right now, but you are raising an important question that we need to have as part of the policy and code discussion.
Thank you. I'm glad that you note that, because I believe that should be a big caveat when we go forward to do things, because it's very powerful tool, very good tool, but we want to be sure that it doesn't get lost, the message, how we need to be vigilant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. So staff, I just want to thank you very much for bringing this forward and for committing to the hard work that you're going to have to do in the next 6 months. It's an ambitious schedule, but as you know, I feel like it's a long time coming, and we can't work on this soon enough because the problem is just growing significantly. I think the 2,500 units in 10 years was not an ambitious goal at all. And especially as we see the need increase, that number looks so small. So I'm really hoping that we can do more than that at the end of 10 years. And I think that this ability to develop properties is a real win-win for the church properties and for affordable housing advocates, because there's so many churches who just are not getting the revenue that they need to support the land that they have. And to be able to put affordable housing in these environments is such a win-win. for everybody. And as we saw with the Lutheran Church on 8th Street, you know, if the church doesn't do that and they sell to market, then you just get a bunch of, you know, brand new homes, which is not a bad thing at all, but it does not serve our affordable housing needs at all. So it's nice to be able to look at these properties individually. I appreciate that you've identified which ones are in single family, which ones are in multifamily, which ones are in industrial and mixed use spaces. And I think that, you know, there'll probably be a different treatment for all those areas. I'm going to challenge you to bring back after 6 months, within a year of today, that you bring back the, what was I going to say? The growth corridor ones, so that we might be able to work with those quickly, because those seems like a little bit of a no-brainer compared to the other ones. But I'm happy with what you're proposing here. I do have 2 questions. One you've kind of addressed, but I would like to hear how you're going to analyze the potential traffic impacts that multifamily housing might have. And the other one is, I thought this was an interesting question that was proposed in one of our emails. We talk about the nonprofits creating affordable housing, but what about for-profit organizations creating affordable housing? Are they allowed to do that under the rules that we have here?
Okay, I'll go ahead and hit both those questions. So the traffic impacts are, I think it's looking at auto traffic. It's looking at the frequent transit network for what proportion might use transit. So I think we have a good framework, having looked at the growth corridor work in Bell Red, East Main, Wolverton, Eastgate, as far as how to analyze traffic and when we're doing density changes and kind of what it means to kind of fully analyze it. So it's essentially looking at what it's zoned now, maybe some scenarios for what could happen there in the future and how that syncs up to our very robust traffic model. So I think we have a pretty good grasp on doing the traffic analysis portion of it.
Great.
The for-profits, it's, that has been brought up a few times. And for example, in Bell Red, under the incentive system, we do see a mix of affordable and market happening in a project. And that's kind of how that incentive system works out there. 1377 does have some provisions that we want to talk more with our city attorney's office about, that do refer to the development or project being all affordable. So I think that's the one provision in there that we're having to look at and see how it syncs up with kind of mixed income developments, but also kind of abiding by at least the provisions of 1377. So I think it's
couldn't a for-profit do all affordable housing? If some benevolent company wanted to come in and put affordable housing on church property, wouldn't that apply? Shouldn't that be able to apply?
Yeah, it does. It does appear that the only provision is that they are a minimum of 50 years and that it is affordable. So, right. And the city can determine if it's, what area median income level. So if it's for-profit wanting to actually do affordable, at least our early take on things, provided we do want to look at it more closely with the city attorney's office, is that a for-profit could do affordable and still meet the provisions of 1377.
Right. Okay. So I just didn't want to limit it to who does it, as long as they're creating what that rule wants us to create.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I feel like there's a consensus for you to go ahead and initiate this work. I hear the desire for a robust community process in doing this. And I'm looking forward. I think, some of the concerns that people have, we will be able to see when you bring back your recommendations, how we're going to vote on that and how we're going to what direction we'll go at that time. But I think, what you're planning to do looks good, and it sounds like the council supports it. So I'm going to just go one more time down and just see if anybody has one last comment, or if they're comfortable with the option 1, which is, I can read it. It's to direct staff to work on the incentive-based approach for increasing affordable housing potential on eligible land consistent with affordable housing strategy action C1. So, Councilmember Stokes.
I'm in favor. Let's do it.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis.
In favor, let's move forward.
Councilmember Barksdale.
Ready to proceed with option 1.
Councilmember Robertson.
I'm supportive. However, I would like to make sure that we have time in the schedule after the CPA to have a touch back to council on the land use code so that we have the ability to give guiding principles to the Planning Commission.
Emil, is that in your plan? Proposed plan?
The question I would have would be, our proposed plan was to be able to at least talk about some of the ideas for the land use code amendment while we're doing the policy work. If there's a desire to actually have guiding principles inform even the early work, I just want to be clear about just the timing of that. If the council would like us to be able to talk about policy and code together and have just a touch point, let's say in the January, February timeframe to direct let's say the refinement and further work on the LUCA, then that could make sense to me. I don't want to be out doing something talking about the LUCA if council's direction is wanting to give more direction on that before we go out and talk about it.
My request is the latter, which sounds like it could be working in the schedule.
Maybe we could do some staff briefings before that time and weigh in a little bit individually as the work progresses toward the end of the year. Do you think that would work, Emil?
Yeah, that could work. I think we're going to get some good information about the policy and code, and I think if we're out doing the outreach, it's good to be able to talk about both topics.
Okay. Well,
sorry, I thought it was still me. So with that, I'm happy to proceed. I just would like this to come back after assuming we adopt a CPA in December, I'd like it to come back to council to kick back to the Planning Commission to finish the land use code work. And some briefings in the interim would be very welcome.
So I'm really concerned about prolonging this process way beyond what we need to do, and I am interested in weighing in on the direction. I'm wondering if how you think what Councilmember Robertson is proposing, Emil, how that's going to affect the timeline.
I think pragmatically, I do think it is going to take into 2021 to get the kind of most thoughtful code amendments in place. So I do think if we can get some outreach regarding the policy and ideas on code provisions and density levels, then we can bring that back to council with the CPA, just to make sure that staff and the Planning Commission are headed in the right direction on the implementation measures.
That sounds good. That sounds great. What do you think, Councilmember Robertson?
That's perfect. I just want to make sure that we have a touch point before all the work is done at the end of the time, and sounds like we will as far as the schedule, as far as Mr. King is proposing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Zahn.
Yeah, I'm ready to move forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Lee.
I am ready to move forward. I agree with the mayor that, the example she gave about Grace Lutheran Church, those are situations we should be able to address and move and take advantage of the situation without holding it up. But at the same time, I think that I do want to address the question I raised. And I'm happy, however, if we have the opportunity to close the loop, I'm willing to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you. I thank you for everybody's comments and recommendations on this. I think it has really going to help the process. And thank you, staff, for all your work that you've done and that you're going to do. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Deputy Mayor, would you like to make a motion?
Certainly. I move to direct staff to initiate work on an incentive-based approach for increasing affordable housing potential on eligible land consistent with the Affordable Housing Strategy Action C1.
Second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. Thank you very much. I believe that is the end of our meeting. So I'm going to adjourn our meeting and wish everybody a good night. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.